Hello everyone, my name is Malcolm Eastman, and today we're going to be going over OSPF in Cisco's Packet Tracer. Right, so I know I've created a video showing you how to configure OSPF before, but that was with the network command, right? Where we're going through the OSPF configuration router and we're configuring the network and using the network commands to specify which interfaces are going to use OSPF. So if you've been looking and studying for the new CCNA as well as the CCNP, you probably noticed that one of the things they're pushing with OSPF is a new way to configure it, right? And it's not using it under the router configuration, OSPF router 1 or whatever the AS number is. Instead, they're doing it through the interfaces, right? And one thing that I found with this new way to configure the OSPF configurations is that it's a lot more streamlined. It's faster. It's a little more simpler. It's much more simpler than the network command, using it the network commands. So here we just have OSPF area 0, and we have router 1, router 2, and router 3. And I'm going to start by and also we have these 3 different point-to-point networks, right? Because again, when we're using OSPF, we're connecting router to a router. We kind of want to make sure we're using a point-to-point network, basically, which would be a WAC 30 or /30, which would essentially have 2 usable addresses, right? Because again, it's just a point-to-point, point A to point B. Point A to point B. So I'm going to go into router 1. And what I'm going to do is, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create OSPF on this router, right? So OSPF router 1. That's all I'm going to do for the router configuration. Now I'm going to hit exit. Yeah, exit. And then I'm going to create my loopback, right? I'm going to create a loopback. So this is for router 1, interface loopback 1. And then I'm going to add the IP address, IP add, and that's going to be 1.1.1.1, and that's going to be 255.255.255.255, right? Now, here's where we are going to be adding OSPF, or telling OSPF which interfaces to use. So I'm going to use this loopback interface, right? So I'm going to put IP OSPF, and what's the number? So it was 1, and then the area, right? And that was area 0. And that's essentially it when you're adding an interface to OSPF, right? See how simple that was? I didn't have to do network command or anything like that. I pretty much just had to do IP OSPF area 1 for that interface. Right, now I'm going to do the same thing for the other 2 interfaces, right? And so the other 2 interfaces that I have connected would be interface F0. Actually, no, not F0. It would be interface G0/0/0. And that's the same thing, IP OSPF area maybe 1, area 0. And then I'm going to do the same thing for interface G0/0. That's where my other, and G0/01. And then it's the same thing, IP OSPF 1, area 0, right? And now that's pretty much it for router 1. So I'm going to hit end. And I just want to also look and make sure OSPF is running. So I'm going to do show IP protocols. And I see OSPF is running. And it has the router ID 196.10.11.1. And I don't want that, so we're going to change that really quick. I want that to have the loopback as the ID. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back into configuration terminal, and then I'm going to go into interface, and I'm going to go into the router OSPF 1, I'm going to do router ID, and I'm going to do 1.1.1 because I want it to have the loopback interface as its router ID. So I'm going to do show IP protocols, and now it has 1.1.1, as you can see right here. Okay. And then let me just make sure all the interfaces are up. Show interface, show IP interface brief, and they're all up. Okay, great. I'm going to hit exit. And now I'm going to go to our next router. We're going to go to router 3. Go ahead CLI. And then we're going to head into configuration terminal again. And we're going to do router OSPF 1. And then I'm going to hit exit. And I'm going to do interface loopback 2. Well, that actually should still be 1. And then IP add. And that's going to be, this is going to be 2.2.2.2, and then 255, 255, 255.255. And then I'm going to do IP OSPF 1 area 0. And then we're going to hit exit. And we're going to do interface G0/0/0. And then we're going to add this interface to OSPF as well. We're going to do IP OSPF 1 area 0. And then, actually, I just realized I didn't add the loopback to OSPF. So let's go back to interface loopback. And as you can see right here, we just actually formed an adjacency right here. We established a OSPF neighbor with router 1. As you can see, this is router 1's ID. So let's do interface G0/0/1. And then we're going to do the same thing, IP OSPF 1 area 0. Then we're going to hit exit. Well, actually, we're going to hit end because now we're pretty much done. And I want to just see show IP protocols. And this one also, I also want to change the router ID as well. So let's go back into configuration terminal. T. We're going to do router OSPF 1. And then we're going to do router ID. And this is going to be 2.2.2. 2.2.2.2. Then we're going to hit exit. And then we're going to do show. Or since we're in the configuration terminal, we're going to do show IP pro, short for protocols. And I'm looking and I can see, and it's got some run. It's got another. It's telling me that I have a neighbor. I'm looking, and everything was good here. So now we're gonna end out of router 2. And we're gonna hit exit. And now we're done with router 2. And now we're gonna go to router 3. And I want you to notice that how quickly we are going. Oops, sorry about that. I want you to notice how quick we are going through this configuration. All right, so now let's head to router 3. And then we're going to hit enable, and then we're going to hit Conf T. And then, again, same thing. Make sure we're going to create the OSPF. So it's going to be OSPF 1 as well. And then I'm going to do router ID initially. So it's going to be 3.3.3.3. And then I'm going to hit exit. And now I'm going to create the loopback interface, loopback 1, IP add 3.3.3.3, and then this is 255.255.255.255, and then IP OSPF 1 area 0, and then interface. We're going to switch over to our other interfaces where we want to add OSPF as well. IP OSPF 1 area 0. Switch over to our next interface. And now, there we go. So now we've created an adjacency with 2.2.2. So it's going to be router 2. Let's do, and now we've created one with router 1. So let's look at do, show, actually, no, let me exit out of this. Let me do end, and then we go show IP OSPF neighbors. And now we can see we have 2 full state neighbors. All right. So let's end out of here. Let's go back. Oops, no, that's not what I wanted. I meant to hit exit, but that's fine. Let's exit this one. So as you can see, we created an OSPF that took me about maybe, I want to say 10, 15 minutes to do that. And again, I want to really stress the fact that it was so much more simple to add that than doing it through networking, the network command, right? At least for me, I found that I could just specify which interfaces I want. And let's say that let's say I change this IP address, right? I'm still going to be able to create an adjacency as long as there's an IP address here. So if I change, let's just say I change the network for whatever reason, as long as those commands are there, I'll still be able to form an OSPF if I change the command, right? Opposed to if I have the network command, I have to now do no network, whatever the old network was, and then add the new network with the new network command. With this, I just always have to make sure that there's obviously a network attached to the interfaces in question, and the interfaces are up in the IP OSPF area 1, area 0. And that's the thing you really got to make sure that you're specifying which OSPF process you're using as well as the area, right? And this is the same thing if you have multi-area OSPF, which I should have showed in this video, but I wanted to keep it a little more simple because these are new commands, or not new commands, but this is a new way that Cisco is pushing the configuration of OSPF. That it's really simple. You just have to make sure you're specifying which process, the process ID or the AS number, as well as the area number, so that you can form these adjacencies and the LSAs get sent to the right interfaces so that you can create these areas, these OSPF areas, right? When the routers exchange routing information, right? But one thing I forgot to do is let's check the ping, right? So let's ping. We're just gonna, we're gonna just ping the loopbacks. They're proposing loopbacks. So let's do 3.3.3. And so I'm able to ping router 3, and let's try to ping router 2, right? So as you can see, I'm able to get pings from everybody, right? Because the process worked. So again, it's just a little bit, it's a little different, but I find this much more simpler to configure OSPF. I think this should be the way to configure OSPF going forward for any network professional or just any IT professional that just happens to be configuring networks. And I got this thing, find it a little more simple, a little more easier. But again, networking, if you decide to continue to use the network command through the OSPF router configuration, that's fine too, but just be aware that you do have other options, right? And also you can also specify like point-to-point networks and things like that, where if you don't want a particular area to pass out LSAs, you can specify point-to-point, make a point-to-point network. But that's all I have right now. Again, this was just a showing of how to configure OSPF through the interface terminal or interface through interface commands. I hope you learned something. And as always, you can reach out to me on LinkedIn at Malcolm Eastman. or you can reach out to me through email at malcolm@malcolmeastman.tech. This has been another Packet Tracer training video, and I will see you in the next video.